Hey guys, we are here doing the first movie review for Nerd This, and of course, it's a nerdy film. It's Star Wars: The Last Jedi. So, like for me, I remember being like a little kid. We watched the original trilogy on the VHSs way back in the day. I watched all the prequels, and admittedly watched Episode One a ton when I was a kid, because I was like 10 when it came out. No judgment. I've seen the other films. I've watched all the Clone Wars series. I haven't watched all of the Rebels. I've watched very little of it really. Um, I didn't really don't really love the animation they use for it. I think it's kind of weird. But I've played a ton of the games, whether it's Outcast, Academy, Jedi Knights of the Knights of the Old Republic. I played two, but I played one probably like 10 times through in its entirety. I love Knights of the Old Republic, the first one. Um, Played the Old Republic, the MMO a lot, and actually even played a paper RPG, which for those of you who don't understand, that's like it's basically Dungeons and Dragons with like but Star Wars skin. um, so I played that for about a year, once or twice a month with some guys. So I'm like a 8 or a 9 out of 10 Star Wars nerd. Certainly not a 10. I would never claim to be so. This is an that person's opinion. So let's get into it and not take forever, huh? So, very important question. What did you think of the porgs? Oh my gosh. Okay, so the porgs were fine. I had no problem with the porgs. I thought they were funny. I thought the scene with him, the porgs and Chewbacca was hilarious when he's like about to eat the one. I really found that funny. There were a lot of things that I found funny in this movie, and I overall enjoyed the movie. I want to get. Oh, we'll get into an overview at the end. Okay, so what really grinds your gears? The main thing that really grinded my gears was the whole Finn and Rose storyline. It it didn't impact the plot at all, and I really don't feel like the characters developed at all, other than like kind of this like potential love triangle getting set up between like Rose and Finn and Rey. Like maybe Finn certainly didn't grow at all, and is a couple opportunities where he could have were like prevented. But just like plot wise, like that's very like objective, right? If you cut out all of the video for like for Finn and Rose, and you just yank that out of the movie and just like squeeze everything else together, where you have like the gaps now from the point where they leave until the point where they crash land on Crate. There's no change in the movie. No change in the movie other than since Benicio del Toro doesn't have the opportunity then to be there and then turn in the rebels, like all those transports don't die there, which just means that there's a bunch of people that can't fit in the Millennium Falcon whenever they're stuck on Crate. So they die anyways. I mean, maybe a few people, maybe like a few dozen people can get onto the Falcon from those transports. Those transports obviously can hold more people than the Falcon. So, I mean, if they're all filled with the entirety of this like capital ship, so in their they result in people getting killed that would have died anyway, or at least captured and had a bad time. I don't know. They did absolutely nothing. Finn did not develop whenever Benicio del Toro was giving all these things about like there's not good and like bad. There's people on both. There's no good and evil. Everyone's just kind of like Finn doesn't buy that at any point. He doesn't struggle with it. I think they could have, and to me that's one of the things that's frustrating is I think there were a couple moments where they could have let Finn be really significant, and they didn't, either because they took it away or this is like missed an opportunity. Because I mean, Finn is not like some stalwart of conviction, right? I mean, he had enough conviction to leave the Empire, but he's not like the fortuitous like good person who's never wavers. Like that's not him in a way he was almost like a bland version of that. Um, but all they had to do was have him struggle a little bit with the info that like Benicio del Toro was trying to like give him, and then when he has the moment with like the Death Star battering ram at the end, like let him sacrifice and let him have a line basically saying like there is good and there is evil and it's worth dying to like to show the difference, and let him do that. Like that's awesome. That's making great use of Finn. It's true to his character because while he but no, we don't get any of that. So that part's really, but and then all the people's like, well, what about the kid who used the Force? I mean, I'm not saying that the kid on Canto Bight, which is the like garbage, like planet where they just have all like the casino crap and everything, and really preachy blah blah blah. That kid may be nothing. It's like, oh, but he has a name in this book. It's like having a name didn't help out Bib Fortuna. If you don't know who I'm talking about, then there's my point. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, then you get my point, and we're on the same page. He's the doorman at Jabba's palace in the Return of the Jedi. So having a name doesn't inherently mean you're something. Who knows? The kid might end up being something. We don't know. And if so, okay, well, now that there's some point to it, but even so, there were a crap ton of things that were a mess with that whole planet. Again, I do overall enjoy this movie. This is the thing that ground my gears most. I thought the whole subplot with him was a trash heap of writing. And like quick like Phasma footnote while we're talking about things that are irrelevant that Finn went in. Phasma was supposed to be, we were all being told like Kathleen Kennedy is telling us like, oh, like she's gonna be a huge like badass and she's this big girl power like stormtrooper person, and basically a synopsis of the first movie for her is being like snuck up on and captured on her own ship by a janitor, a scrapper, and Han Solo and a Wookiee, and Chewbacca. So, but still, definitely a bad look. And then the second movie, and don't forget being thrown into the trash compactor, you know what I mean, trash chute. So, and then the second movie she's in, she gets beaten in hand-to-hand combat by a janitor. And then, doesn't technically... Oh, she beats him, and then because hubris? I don't know. Forgets about a elevated platform that there's no way she hasn't ridden on it before, that Finn then comes up on. And that whole fight is a joke. For all the people who are like, oh, well, like, Finn kind of like has the Force. Literally, there are entire races that are immune to the Force, and that's like, pro and con, like they can't be affected by Force abilities, like manipulation, but they also like can't use it, so like they don't have its power. Those people would beat Jedis all the time. You can look it up, this race. They're like assassins, like Jedi assassins. So like a non-Force user versus a Force user does not mean the Force user automatically wins. And obviously Finn is incredibly untrained, as even if he is remotely Force sensitive. Phasma is literally more ticket bait and more toy bait than the Porgs were. And the Porgs were about as relevant as Finn in this movie. So that's just kind of the Canto Bight planet. I mean, the whole... I don't want to get political because it's just like not valuable. Regardless of kind of what you believe about like 1%y stuff, the dialogue was grossly clunky. And, I don't know if the only way to make that much money is through selling stuff to the bad guys and good guys and more. Like, someone needs to inform Jeff Bezos, because apparently he's not a wealthy person anymore. Or he's secretly, like, selling guns to, like, bad guys. I don't know. So is at least overextended, even if you are kind of along that political persuasion. And to me, like, considering the climate, there's no way that wasn't intentional And so I was that was really disappointing for me. I would have loved everything on Canto Bight to have just been removed from the movie. It would have been better. Um, yeah. Okay. So, all right. What did you think about? Oh, did Grey Luke grind your gears? Grey Luke didn't grind my gears. For if you don't understand why I'm calling him Grey Luke, so in the expanded universe there is which like includes the video games, like in Knights of the Old Republic, Jolie Bindo is like a gray Jedi, right? So it's people who don't kind of see like the light side as it's kind of portrayed in like the prequels and all that as an actual like pure version of like how you're supposed to be as a force sensitive user person thing. The and that like emotions are okay and that but self-control is still good, and so it's kind of like a balanced force user. And that's good in a lot of ways, actually, because part of the reason why you have dramatic evils like Palpatine is because you had so much dramatic good that the Force needs to balance out. So the only way to have to balance out all these legions of Jedi that are across the universe is you have someone as incredibly powerful as Palpatine come along, who wrecks things and shifts the pendulum really strong. When you have a bunch of gray people, it just tends not to swing as much. So the gray Jedi is something that's existed in like canonized stuff for a while, and because the video games are still canon, they're not quite the same level as film canon, but the video games, because they're still like Lucasfilms and all that, like they possess credibility. So that didn't bother me. I thought it was kind of weird that like, well, okay, some of the dialogue I didn't love for like Luke being there, but as the whole like Luke momentarily going to kill Kylo, I know that's the main thing people freak out about, right? Is like Luke would have never even for a split second, because again, like according to Luke, like he ignited the lightsaber, he was going to do it, and then he stopped even before Kylo kind of woke up. He decided he wasn't doing it. So like for a couple seconds has elapsed. And the main thing for me that plays into that is we know Snoke is a factor at that point, because Snoke is the one manipulating Kylo to make him go towards the dark side. So like Snoke and Kylo actively have a relationship in this moment. And Snoke is obviously aware of Luke's existence. And Snoke obviously, again, because he is more of like the sage type, the consular type, like force user, it creates the mind bridge between Rey and Kylo. The idea that he could have planted and like magnified some fear in Luke that caused at least that couple second, lapse of judgment, through this fear, that doesn't feel weird at all to me. That's what it would translate to. I mean, Luke is an emotional character, and I think Mark Hamill did an amazing job of like aging the character while still keeping it to himself. Like still very snarky, still emotional, still cares so much about people, and that's like the main thing that motivates him. It's the failure of his family that causes him to go into exile, and it's the desire to like save his friends that motivates him to reconnect with the Force. And frankly, I think all that works. Cutting yourself off from the Force is totally a thing. Usually it was done by a group of people to either Sith or Grey Jedi who the Council thought were like dangerous, and so you would like cut them off from the Force instead of like killing them. So that can definitely happen. I totally get like Grey Luke, right? His frustration with with himself, where he kind of felt like he'd failed this perfect. He alluded a lot to like Luke the legend, or like the legendary Luke Skywalker, and I think he really felt like he failed himself, and he was just really hard on himself with that. And yeah, I Totally get how he could have that few seconds lapse of judgment, which everyone seems to have a massive problem with. Again, considering the Snoke factor, totally plausible. I get him wanting to be away. He does have that line where he says, like, I came here to die, which then, like, well, why does R2 have a map that you gave him? So there are a couple lines that, if, again, just, like, removed, I'm fine with him being there, and I'm fine with him being resilient to coming. I'm fine with him being resistant to training Rey. And I'm also fine with how he changes his mind to go along with it. I didn't think there were any problems with that. And yeah, I love, like, cantankerous curmudgeon, like, old Luke. And again, for anyone thinking, like, oh, well, how could he go gray? He's, like, the beacon of lightness. Okay, so in the EU, which, again, like, obviously is no longer, like, fully canon, but even though that's not true. So in the EU, Luke actually goes to the dark side. Like, full-on dark side. He comes back. But the EU appeased, enjoyed 10 out of 10s Star Wars mega fans for years and years and years. And they got with that. I feel like you should be able to get with, like, Luke went a little gray. He's obviously a more complicated human than just the, like, light side is the best of all time. And, yeah. He's not, unless you want him to be a bland, static character, which he's not. More Force stuff. Force. Oh, yes. More Force stuff. First, going with, what about Mary Poppins Organa? Yeah. So I think that scene was added after she died. I think that in the original cut, an explosion goes off on the bridge. You know, some people die. She gets hurt. And then everything else plays out like normal. She gets brought into, like, the back to tank and just getting healed and all that. Like, I think they just added this scene where she gets blown out and forces back in order to kind of manipulate the fact that obviously we know that Carrie Fisher is dead. And the main reason I think that is the graphics are really bad for her coming back. So just real quickly before I go on, so, like, the actual science of, like being out in outer spacey, right? So basically the only oxygen she's going to have available is the oxygen that's already in her system. Your lungs don't get to keep the air they have in them, so it's like what's in your bloodstream. So you're not utterly oxygen deprived. You die to asphyxiation when you're out in space. You don't get, like, the whole, like, vacuum sucked, like, inside out. That's not, like, an immediate thing. You die due to asphyxiation and you freeze. I find it unlikely that someone could go unconscious and be able to have enough oxygen in order to become conscious again. That seems like a massive stretch. But pretending that somehow whatever she did, the actual her getting back to the ship, I mean, it's a frictionless zero gravity environment. Like, that doesn't take much effort. Both Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher are on record saying that, like, Luke trained Leia in between now and then basically that Leia thought she was better use as, you know, the role she ended up assuming instead of becoming a Jedi. And so a very raw thing, like, you know, going towards that thing, it's not like she's trying to, like, you know, create an astral projection like Luke does later. Just trying to pull it. So that would actually be incredibly easy, assuming that she, again, had enough oxygen running through in order to make that happen. My main beef with it is just that it looks really crappy. It looks like she's on on a wire or something. And obviously she's not, because it's a CGI like her, but don't actually think she's on a wire. It just looks like that. So it looks really awkward, looks really put together last minute. I think that it was added after she died, that little scene, and I think it would have been better if they left it out. But as to whether or not she can make that happen, totally plausible. Luke didn't have that much training either. guys. I mean, he had. You might even be able to argue that Luke gave Leia more training that we didn't see than Luke received in the original trilogy. Like, there was more time available, there's less, pressing, there were fewer pressing matters going on in that time, so that doesn't seem like a stretch to me at all. Force stuff. Astral projection. I mentioned that earlier. That's what Luke did at the end. The main thing that causes fatigue in astral projection is the distance which you are projecting your astral form. Luke couldn't have gone anywhere. His ship was, wrecked up in the water. He didn't have, a backup ship. He didn't want to come. So his choice at that point, and if he was going to help, he was to use this astral projection in order to help. And he did that. But he had also just reconnected himself to the Force. Now, Luke, anything like EU canon Luke, would not have died from even an extended astral projection over an extended distance. But this Luke, who had cut himself off from the Force, who basically in a moment had to grasp all of that again, I think it's entirely plausible that was a really taxing event on him, and obviously he doesn't die. He chooses to become one with the Force. Maybe he would have died, maybe he wouldn't have, but I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi made the same decision. He could have continued fighting Vader. He could have maybe tried to escape on the ship while still kind of giving them priority to escape. But he knew he was more valuable in this Force Ghost form than he was with the limitations of a human body along with the strengths that it presents. And I think Luke basically decided the same thing. And again, was maybe going to die. And so chose instead, okay, I'm going to become one with the Force and become a Force Ghost, and I'm going to be useful that way. So I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, the I'm Mary Poppins y'all moment was not good for me. Let's see. What do we have next? Oh yeah. What about Poe? Right, we've talked about Finn. Now we have Poe. I mean, I really liked Poe as a character. He's probably after Mark Hamill, I think I might have liked. He just felt really true to himself. The growth that it felt like he grew a bit through kind of the becoming more mature and not just being someone who rushed into action. As much as it is super cool, the scene where he flies and takes out all the turrets on the surface of the ship. There's supposed to be hundreds of those things, of those turrets that he destroys, and he destroys like a handful, and it takes a few minutes. There should have literally been 100 times as many. So that was kind of a huge problem. It was a really cool scene, and I really found it fun. It did bother me a little bit that I'm literally there should be 100 times more of those, according to again, nerdy Star Wars dude. If you look up how many of those turbo laser whatevers are supposed to be, there's hundreds, and somehow he destroys 12 and they're gone, and there's nothing else on there. So it's not those were the mega turbo lasery things, and the little turbo lasery things weren't even there, so where did they go? Yeah, that element it was really disappointing, but super cool scene, although a bit flawed. Let's see, what did I have? Oh yeah, what about Admiral Holdo? Vice Admiral Holdo, bad Taylor. I liked her a lot. I don't get why they couldn't tell Poe the plan. I mean, you could use the argument of, they wanted him to, they either didn't trust him based on how he'd acted, they thought he might sabotage the plan and rally everyone anyway, but by the time where he does what you were afraid he would have done if you told him, which is basically start a mutiny in order to try and change the plan, why don't you tell him then? Because clearly, whenever he found out the plan from, like, I know Leia was telling him as well, not just Holdo, so, like, that helped, but, like, whenever he told him the plan, he got it and saw how it was a good idea. And all he did in between then was stay himself, so I don't think there's a good reason to not tell him, and that was a big thing that enabled stuff to kind of continue in limbo for a while, so it felt like, again, a little more lazy writing. Here's the main thing, like, the whole, like, Rian Johnson, like, I don't doubt his fandom. I actually just kind of, in general, think the writing isn't as strong as everyone's giving credit for. Yeah, I'm not seeing it in this movie. Anyway, back to Holdo. I liked her. I thought she was maybe going to be like a mole, like a spy. She was the person who was helping the First Order track the ships. And obviously, like, she's a great actress and she has a relationship with Carrie Fisher. And so, like, knowing that makes the exchange between the two of them before she leaves to, like, stay on the ship, like, a lot more significant. So, yeah, overall, I really liked Holdo. She did a heck of a lot more than Phasma ever did. And as for the whole, like, light speed, like, a battering ram thing, that's something that, like, people have talked about, again, in, like, EU type conversations forever. Like, dude, if you just used, like, a paperweight, it could, like, cut through a Star Destroyer. There's a difference between cutting through a Star Destroyer and destroying a Star Destroyer. But, because, if you just essentially turned on a massive lightsaber through the entirety of a Star Destroyer and you didn't cut anything that set off chain reactions or anything else, well, you just got, like, some cut wire metal places. So, yeah, I think the way that they had it work out, too, where, they kind of, it does it should have happened the way it did, but it does open up all of the, well, why don't you just have people, like, pop out of Lightspeed all the time and destroy big ships? I mean, just build them that way. And that's a great question that the answer is because then it would make space fights super boring. And that's not a very good answer, but it is the answer. Ooh.
What about Snorksis? Snorksis precious.
I mean, I saw the death coming, like, and I don't mean, like, oh, you mean, like, whenever the sword started shaking, you thought it was actually gonna work? Like, no, like, he put the sword down there, I'm like, yeah, I bet, Kylo tries to use the Force in order to turn that on, but I actually thought that it wouldn't work, because, so here's my problem with that scene. So, Kylo is a fighter, like a Guardian type, Sith. He's physical combat. His Force skills are not that strong. He's not much of a mental manipulator. That's not so much him. And then, kind of like the Darth Vader, right? But he's even more on, like, the lightsaber combat form, because Vader was more gifted at, like, Force choking and that sort of thing. But Snoke is definitely down the end of, like, Palpatine, right? Like, all, like, the mental manipulation. He's, like, more like the sagey, like, consular equivalent, and there's no way Snoke wouldn't have detected that Force unless you were just claiming that there's so much hubris. They didn't detect it. That he would have felt the Force going out of Kylo and it being used towards the object near him, which he would have immediately recognized. But even besides that, how he died, which is kind of lame, and I don't care that he wasn't, like, Mace Windu years later or something like that. The main thing that bothered me about Snoke is that with the Emperor, in the original trilogy, you get him in some holograms in Empire Strikes Back, and then you get him in some big scenes in Return of the Jedi. For Snoke, you get him in some holograms in The Force Awakens, and you get him in some pivotal scenes in The Last Jedi. And yet, the difference between just how evil the characters feel, the difference between how even if you get into how powerful, even if you don't get into that, because clearly, I mean, if Palpatine, Vader, and Luke, OG Luke, are in a fight against Snoke, Rey, and Kylo, I mean, that first crew utterly and completely wrecks the second one, right? So this generation is not this generation of fighters is not quite on that level, but relative to each other, they still balance. So that kind of like works. So even not even getting into the power, but he just doesn't feel significant to you when he dies. And Palpatine is able to make you feel like it's so significant whenever Vader throws him down. So again, it just feels like you had the same amount of screen time, and yet we have this really less interesting character. Yeah, that's my problem with Snoke's is, it was a cool scene, but in the end, I just didn't really feel anything for him when he died, and he probably shouldn't have died the way he died. All right. Am I pissed off that Rey's parents were nobody? I mean, I don't. There's all this manipulation language over the course of this movie, and so I mean, I don't think like Kylo could have just been lying. He could have been telling the truth, and they're going with this. You don't have to be a Kenobi or a Skywalker in order to be the person who saves the world, which I think is fine. Because they've kind of done away with the whole like Force lineage situation, but at the same time, like Snoke also says like someone coming from the line of Vader, and so it's like, well, are you done with the because so in like EU canon stuff, part of the reason why Jedi aren't supposed to have kids is because Force sensitives having kids together results in more powerful children, on average. And the Jedi didn't want to create super powerful things because it can, like, kind of like the weapons of mass destruction, getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and eventually you have something you can just blow up everything. They didn't want to build towards that point. So, that's, why, like, oh, Snoke talking about someone from the lineage of Vader, that's, like, someone who's, like, conceived by the Force. So he has a strong, like, bloodline. But then if you're saying, like, Rey can come from nothing, well, it's like, well, that seems a little counter to that. I hope that she isn't from nothing, and I don't think she is, but it's definitely still an option. But I mean, we don't know. We don't actually know. Am I out of fun slides? Okay, apparently I'm out of fun slides. But just some of my other thoughts. So, I like the whole Mind Bridge thing. How it gave them the opportunity to kind of be real with each other, Kylo and Rey, and I liked how it created this bond between them. I liked how kind of the whole seeing the future thing, because that's the thing that does Luke in. It's the thing that does Anakin in. Is they have this limited vision of the future. Luke, when he's on Dagobah, sees his friends in trouble, and I need to go. Anakin sees Padme in trouble, in like childbirth and labor, and says like, I've got to stop that. When in reality, like, he creates some of the pain she ends up experiencing, and it's a trap for Luke. That's why he's been. So I like how the kind of like the limited perception of the future results in them kind of getting tricked by Snoke. I wish that they had a real fight instead of just splitting a lightsaber. Like, it was cool seeing them kill the guard and stuff, but I guess the one pro that Snoke does have over the Emperor is that Snoke doesn't. See, that's the thing. Does Snoke have so much hubris that he never would think that Kylo would ever try and get back at him, despite the fact that he's like pissing him off all the time? Or does he not have any hubris because he doesn't send away his guard like the Emperor does? Which is it? You can only have one. You can't have both. Because it doesn't make sense, because now you have a character that's being two things at the same time. I didn't love Snoke. It wasn't a performance issue. It was a writing issue. But anyway, I think we needed an actual fight between Rey and Kylo, just so that they could have a chance to like not kill each other. If you get what I mean, like you know, have that like where they fight because they both, you know, they're both fighting for their view and what they believe in, but then that like they both would have an opportunity to kill each other and wouldn't take it because that's not the point. They don't want to kill the other person. They want them, you know, each other to be together on the same side and to feel like belonging to someone. I wanted that, and we didn't get that. Um, I know I've done a lot of ragging on the movie, and I do think that there's a lot of huge writing problems that uh yeah, just feel really weak. It's an extremely entertaining movie. I laughed a lot. There was lots of fun. I enjoyed the fights. Um, I'd probably give it like a 6.5 out of 10 overall. We still have to see kind of where things go in this third one before I think, because like obviously you know the original like just Star Wars, right, which we now call New Hope, that was not anticipated to be a part of a series, at least not when they were there, you know, in production. They weren't like, oh, we're definitely doing the, you know, 2 more installments of this. um but this trilogy was like going to be a trilogy the whole time, and so maybe it'll be a little bit of a Lord of the Rings situation where the sum of the parts, like the whole work is greater than the sum of the parts. I mean, Lord of the Rings is each part is also awesome, but um, yeah, I actually think I might have liked. I'm really torn between which I liked more actually out of Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Force Awakens, it did not bother me that it was basically an homage to A New Hope. That didn't bother me at all. Now, if they'd done the same thing with Last Jedi, then I would have been like, okay, well, now you're just being lazy with everything, and you're being lazy with everything. But if you're purposely doing an homage, then you're purposely making a new movie. Okay, I can get with that. Um, but I enjoyed the movie. There are lots of writing issues with, I mean, pretty much any blockbuster. As much as I like the Marvel movies, there are lots of problems with those. My main problems were the things that it was just like wasting characters. I felt like Finn and Rose were essentially wasted characters. I felt like Phasma was a wasted character. Um, and I feel like Snoke was a wasted character. I feel like the whole like Canto Bight planet was like a wasted planet, a waste of time. Um, but I mean, and there are other things they could go into, like, okay, well, if while the First Order fleet is tracking them, why don't they have some of these ships like pop into light speed and then pop back into light speed in front of them because they're not running out of fuel? Why don't they have people from another garrison come in and cut them off? Again, like you use the hubris argument, but like you could only use the hubris argument so many times, like with different characters. I don't know. There were a bunch of really weak, like, oh, this dialogue doesn't make sense because that makes it. Wait, so Snoke didn't know that there was a tracker on his ship? Like Hux is just like, no, I have this super secret thing that I've installed on your ship without your knowing. Like, yeah, I feel like that's not likely. Some really weak writing, but in the end, it was still a really entertaining movie. And I love the moment between Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill at the end. I love apparently like she like changed or improv the line or something where just like I changed my hair, like so great. Like I'm not Mark Hamill, and I have never met him. I don't know, but I just feel like for him that's probably gonna, that moment in the movie is probably gonna be really cathartic for him, just continuing to go into the future, because it's a goodbye to her that he didn't know he was saying, and there's just something really beautiful about that. Even though obviously it wasn't something that the directors created. They just created in the movie. They didn't know the future at that point. But yeah, overall, really like the movie. There's a bunch of really weak writing things, and yeah, I'm sure I left out some stuff that I liked. I'm sure I left out some stuff that I didn't. But there you go. That is the first movie review for Nerd This, and hopefully you guys somehow made it through 40 minutes of me talking. Holy crap. You're troopers. Bye.